The watercolor exercise for this week is the tint and shade exercise. Now, tint is when you're adding white to your color, and shade is where you're adding black to the color. So we're going to create these rectangular bars that we're going to fill with different colors, the basics, and then we're going to add the shade on one side and then gradually make a nice gradient so that the middle is the most saturated color, the most intense color, then all the way to the tint where it's white on the other side. So you can see I've already done the yellow ochre, and this is always an opportunity too to practice your lines and your architectural lettering. So you want this to look neat and nice as a good reference. This one's still drying, so you can see there's some movement of the watercolor, and that's okay. You just want the overall gradient to be present. The next one is orange, and what I've done is I've actually mixed two colors to create an orange that I'm happy with. So I've got the cadmium red and cadmium yellow. So I've got that pre-mixed over here. I'm going to load up my brush, and I'm going to first start by putting the most intense color in the middle. This is the saturated portion of the gradient between tint and shade. And then with watercolor, you probably have noticed that you don't really use white. You get white highlights from showing the white of the paper underneath. So that means on this side, the tint side, we're going to just leave clear water on this side. Basically clear. And then on this side, the shade, we're working towards black. And so I'm going to add just a color block of black here. So now we know what we're working towards on each side. So from here, I'm going to start to move the orange towards the shade portion. And the goal is that these two will kind of meet. And on the shade side, you might also have to pick up a little extra orange and add that. But see how I'm using a good amount of water, and I can go back in. You know, to me this isn't blended enough, so I'm going to go back in and just simply touch down. Since there's enough water, there's room for movement, right, without showing brush strokes. So I'm just going to kind of tap, tap, tap to pull some of the black into the orange. And see how it's starting to move down and creating a nice gradient, a nice shade. So when applied to an architectural drawing, the darkest shade might be a shadow, but then you'll have shades in between, you know, where there might be a face of the building that's in shadow, but it's not completely black, right? So you'll be using some of these mid-range shades to fill in all the colors. And then with white, same thing, highlight. You might have really bright highlights on a building where the sun is directly shining, but then there's going to be that mid-range as well. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to start to pull this color, and you want to work fairly quick because see how this was starting to form a line there because it was drying. So I'm going to start to pull the color down, and I might need a little more. So see how I just added some with the wet on wet method. I'm going to bring it down to meet that other side, and again, it's not really doing what I want it to do here, so I'm going to go back and just manipulate the color with my brush and start to bring it down so it forms more of a gradient. And if I have to, I'll go back and I'll get more for the middle, and same thing, kind of move it down. So I'm using a very light touch here, just letting the color come off my brush into the water here. And then as usual, you don't want to mess with things too much. But as it dries, if you notice it's bleeding in a way that you don't want it to, you can always take some paper towel and dab a little bit to pull up some of the color, and then go back with a wet brush to smooth it out. But at some point, you're going to say, okay, this looks good, and you're just going to let it dry and see how the colors blend together between the black and the white of the paper.